So welcome to using header files as contracts. We're going to focus purely on the interface to our new class. And by the end of the video, we will have a whole new file called fbullcowgame.h. And in the case of you Xcode people, it will have created you a .cpp file too. And we'll have written class, fbullcowgame like this, and public. And we will have written some methods that I've blurred out here because I don't want to ruin the challenge, and there's no right or wrong answer anyway, but these are going to define the interface to the class, what we're allowed to do. It's a black box we're building right now. There'll also be a private section, which will be things that it will use in order to do its work, but we shouldn't concern ourselves too much with that right now. We want to focus on what work it's going to be doing, not how it's going to be doing the work. So let's dive in and explore the exciting world of classes. So let's make our own class for the very first time. The way to do that, the way to add a new file is to click on the project name here. So we have the solution, and inside the solution we have a single project. Right click, add, and then new item. Okay, so that's what we're doing on the screen. And then in the case of Visual Studio here, I'm just going to add a header file to start with. We're just going to start with a header file here in Visual Studio. We'll add a C++ file later so that we can focus on one thing at a time. I'm going to call it fbullcowgame. Why am I prefixing with F? Well, if you look in the Unreal Coding Standard, I'll show you where to find that. We've seen it before. Then they suggest prefixing there. If you go to the naming conventions, you say most other classes are prefixed by F. So I'm going to do that so that things start to feel familiar. So there we go, fbullcowgame.h. Even though it's a bit weird, at least it will be familiar later.
Hi, I'm Sam, and I'm helping Ben out with some of the Mac content on this course. So I just want to briefly show you how to create that class in Xcode now. So you probably want to go and right-click on the bullcow folder. That's this one under the project. So you've got the project here, and then you've got this folder, or as Xcode likes to call it, a group. Right-click on this, and then we want to go down to New File, and we want to go down to OSX Source, and select the CPP file here. Now don't worry that we don't want the header file, we actually want the CPP. And hit next. We can create our fbullcowgame, as Ben said. And we also want to create a header file. So we will save that. And now that there's a distinction between folders and groups in Xcode. So we're putting it in the bullcow group, which only exists inside of Xcode. But you could also arrange things in different folders. We're not going to here, but just so you're aware, that is a distinction in Xcode. So I'm going to create that. And as you can see, it has created two files here, the .cpp and the .hpp, which is slightly different to what you'll see on Visual Studio. Okay, back to Ben.
So there it is, sitting under header files. What is this thing? It is, as I said before, something that will just be cut and paste onto the top of whatever we include it in. Okay, and we're going to be including it in main.cpp is one of the things we're going to include it in. And the other thing we're going to include it in is our file that we'll make in a little while called fbullcowgame.cpp. So it lets us put the same text in multiple places, literally a cut and paste. So, hash pragma once, what's that about? Well, it's actually not completely standard. It's not in the standards for C++, but it's very, very widely supported. And it's a way of making sure that anything that is imported is only imported once. It's an optimization. We may as well leave it there. So do we need to import any namespaces? No, not at the moment. Let's just get on and write our class. The way you do that is you say class, you give it a name. So what are we going to call the class? Well, the same as the file in this case. Doesn't have to be, by the way. One thing here in C++ is that you can write as many classes in a single file as you want. But for simplicity, especially at the moment, let's just have a file and one class per file, one file per class. It's just going to be a lot easier. Then you put your chevrons. So that's your structure, class. All right. Now, what we want to focus on here in this video is the public interface to this class. What a class is going to consist of is two things, public : and private : By the way, look at the way that it indents that. It indents it across here. That's a bit weird, in my opinion, because normally you'd expect everything that's inside braces like this to be indented. But I allow the default here because it's pretty standard across the industry, and I just treat these things slightly differently to normal keywords. These are just like bookmarks, just to say which part of the class definition you're in. So let's live with that. Anyway, what's this class thing about? Well, look, it's going to have, in general, the pattern we're going to go for is this. We're going to have public methods. Let me write the first public method. The first public method could be reset. Okay, so let's just pretend it exists. And we declare it here. Now, we need something to come back from reset. What would we have come back from reset? For now, nothing. But later on, we're going to want something richer to come back. So I might put comment to do, make a more rich return value. What I mean by that is something that tells us a bit of a status about what actually came back. Okay, but for now we're going to go void just to flesh out the idea. I'm going to write one more method, and then your challenge is going to be to write all the others once I've given you the overview. So once you've reset the game, another thing you might want to be doing is saying, well, let's get the hidden... Oh, by the way, before we move on, resetting the game in future may take in, for instance, an integer as to the size of the word length. Okay? But for this whole section, we're just going to have a single word hard-coded in, so we can leave that out. All right, so what else might we want to do to a bull cow game? Well, for example, once we've reset the game, we might want to get the number of tries. So we'd get an integer back, and we could call this something like get max tries. Okay, and it would return us an integer. So get max tries is quite obvious what it does. I'm going to leave you to fill out the rest of these public methods in a moment after a bit more priming. Now, private, what would be in private? Basically, we don't want to concern ourselves too much with this. We want to concern ourselves with the public interface to this, but you are going to have both private functions, which are helper functions, which allow these things to happen behind the scenes, but you're also going to have private variables called member variables. And these things would be things like, I don't know, we may have an int my current try would be an example, and we may have an int my max tries. Now, I'll explain why I'm prefixing everything with my later on. But what I'm trying to say is that there's a certain amount of stuff. Let me suggest another method, by the way. It could be something like bool is isogram. Is a particular string an isogram. That would be examples of private methods we could imagine we want. Now, of course, string is not imported, so I'll take this away for clarity. So the general pattern with object-oriented programming is that we don't expose any variables publicly. We do all of the getting and setting of variables, however simple it is, through methods. The variables stay private like this. This is pure object-oriented programming like that, and there's a lot to be said for it. So certainly for now, this is how we're going to do things. Let's learn the rules before we break the rules. So I want you to kind of ignore the private members for now. In fact, I'm even going to put a comment that says something like, please try and ignore this and focus on the interface above and spread it out. Could even put some chevrons to say, look upwards, don't get concerned in the implementation details. So I'll leave a big space. All right, let's focus right here on what bull cow game is going to do as an interface. What I want you to do now is have a go at writing the rest of the interface. It's going to change, but I just want you to think about how would you talk to this bull cow game thing if you wanted to. This is top-down design now. We're thinking, we don't know how to make it work yet, and it doesn't do anything, but how would we talk to it if we wanted to? So here's your challenge. Write all the methods you can. I want you to write as many simple signatures as you can. Don't worry about getting it right. There's no right way anyway. The point is to think about it at this stage and enjoy working at a higher level of thinking and abstraction. Go and pause the video. Just write in a couple more helper methods, things that you think you might need in this game. Okay, welcome back. Before you watch my solution, why not share what you've got? Just share your public interface. Preferably take a nice close-in screenshot just of class full bull cow game and just this bit here. As a hint for you, by the way, for taking these screenshots, there's lots and lots of tools, but one free one is called Jing by TechSmith, and there's also there's lots of others, okay? But there's just a tip, Jing, J-I-N-G. Cool. So let me just get you a couple of others that I think that we may need. We may need to get back from this game system the current try. So int get current try. And we may want to get from this, what else? We may want to know if the game is won. So bool is game won. Yeah, we don't let our main code worry about this. Our view code, i.e. the stuff that we've got over here in main CPP, we let the game engine worry about that. What else do we want? We may want to know whether a guess is valid. For now, we'll have bool coming back and check guess validity. And incoming may be a string. So we send in a string. Again, let's make a richer return value for that later. What else? we may want to actually submit a guess. Now, what's going to come back from submitting a guess is complicated because we need bulls and cows together, and you can't put that in a single thing like an integer. So we're going to have to create something called a struct, which we'll see shortly. And that struct is beyond the scope of this video. It'll be in a very short future video. So I think we've got enough methods. If you've got something vaguely looking like this, you've done very well. So we've got a good few methods. You may have come up with some others. It really doesn't matter what's in the private interface right now. That's just messy implementation details. I'm not actually going to hash include string just yet because I want to talk about a couple of consequences here. What I certainly do not want you doing is using namespace up the top here. Using namespace is considered by some developers a very naughty thing to do anywhere, but you never ever do it in a header file, and that's because you can just completely lose track of what the hell's going on if you start including header files that use namespaces. So we do not use using namespace. And I will, in the next video, start talking about two things. One, about how hash includes and hash including files that have hash included others works. And also we'll talk a little bit about using namespace and how we don't use it here, and do various other things to tidy this header file up. But hopefully you get the idea that this is basically just a contract. The most important bit of it is here, and we are defining at a top level what we want this thing to do without worrying about how we're going to do it. Indeed, somebody else could write the code potentially. Okay, congratulations on this. I look forward to seeing your suggested public interfaces to your class. I know some of this, if you're a complete beginner, may all sound a little bit bamboozling, but don't worry about it. Just trust in the process, that it's okay just to write these wishful methods that don't exist yet, and that we can keep adding flesh to the bone as we go through.